In my previous video on positive and negative feedback loops in F1, I talked about how one way of holding back the runaway spread between the successful and the struggling was to introduce negative feedback loops. That is, little mechanisms within the rules that mean better placed teams have to work a little bit harder the more successful they are, or by giving the lower teams a little bonus or a slightly easier time to give them the chance to catch up. One extreme example I gave, not as a genuine solution but more to illustrate the point, was the idea of reverse grids, wherein the grid order would be set by reverse championship order or by reversing the finishing order of the previous race. Either way, it would set the winning drivers to the back of the grid, but the less successful cars closer to pole position. This way, those enjoying the most success would have to fight their way through the field if they wanted to keep earning points and wins and stay near the top of the standings. This would be extremely entertaining to watch, but is somewhat ham-fisted and artificial. Plus it takes away from the fun of the actual qualifying event, which can sometimes be the most nail-biting part of the whole weekend. On top of that, it can also be gamed to a certain degree, with drivers maybe dropping out of a race early if they think it will give them a slightly better grid slot. It has its problems, for sure. So Formula E then. For Season 5, Formula E has managed to introduce a system that allows for a competitive, tense and entertaining qualifying session, but makes things quite a bit trickier for the championship leaders, resulting in more mixed grids, unexpected results, battling races and frustrated drivers. But we like a frustrated driver. We can't have it too easy for them, gotta keep them on their toes, right? So the very simple idea that Formula E implements is group qualifying with the groups arranged in championship order. Drivers go out in groups of 5 or 6, with each group getting just 6 minutes to go out and set a time. After everybody has had a go, the fastest 6 drivers get to have another crack at a lap to try and grab pole position. The key element of this is the way the groups are ordered. The first group to go out is made of the top 5 drivers in the championship standings. The next group is the next 5 drivers in the championship, followed by the next 6 and then the final 6. So the more points you have in the championship fight, the earlier in qualifying session you'll go out to set your time. Formula E qualifying sessions have demonstrated clearly that the track tends to improve as time goes on through the session, so the later a slot you're given, the better the chance you have of setting a faster lap. The track evolves with runtime, sometimes quite dramatically. Going out first, as the championship leaders must, is a disadvantage, as the track is less grippy and therefore making it trickier to nail your lap. The evidence of this disadvantage becomes clear when looking at the Group 1s in qualifying across all of Season 5 so far. Now, ignoring round 1 where the qualifying system was rejigged due to weather delays, on average less than one driver from Group 1 made it through to Super Pole shootout at each event. That is, of the 39 drivers who managed to put in a lap from Group 1 over these 8 qualifying sessions, only 7 of them were fast enough to make the top 6 of those 22 places on the grid. The average qualifying position for Group 1 drivers over rounds 2 to 9 is just 13th position. Now 13th is fairly near the middle of the grid, so you may think that ends up being pretty fair, as it's close enough to being gridded at random. But these are championship leaders. In theory, you would expect them to be qualifying at least in the top half of the grid on average. So we now have a system that puts the leaders on the back foot somewhat going into a race. If you're fighting for the head of the championship, you're gonna have to work even harder at the next race. Qualifying will be trickier for you, and you're more likely to have to fight through the field if you want to keep getting points race on race on race. The question now is this a good thing? Is this a good thing for Formula E? There's not an easy answer to this. Now, Formula E doesn't have some of the problems intrinsic to modern F1 that stifle competition, so it's in less need of negative feedback loops to inject some life and fairness back into the sport. On the other hand, anything that encourages the so-called best of the field to prove themselves race on race by asking them to fight their way to the front is both great entertainment and the ultimate test of their abilities. Formula E may have more wheel-to-wheel racing and argy-bargy overtaking in general, but with energy conservation a key part of winning races, having the best drivers at the front of the grid will only encourage them to take a more measured pace, in the same way that F1 drivers like to slow down and look after their tyres rather than pelt it round lap after lap. Instead, we get the best drivers often having to work extra hard in qualifying to overcome poorer track conditions and/or fight their way through the race to keep earning points, podiums and wins. And some drivers can do it. A lot of the doomed qualifying Group 1 lot do get back to some decent positions consistently on race day. But also, we have managed to get 8 different winners in the first 8 races and 7 different pole sitters in the first 7 races, which is super fun. Is it pure? Well, probably not, but as I've said before, is anything? What does that even mean when you're trying to break it down? Someone has to go out earliest in qualifying, so why not the people with the existing advantage? Over time, the best person would still win anyway, as they have to deliver great race results consistently, and that's the key here. They keep having to prove their skill even as the negative feedback loop tugs them backwards again. No one will win the championship by accident here. For me, it works. I can see why drivers moan about it, but I'm willing to let them moan. It's an interesting added twist that feeds brilliantly into the competitive sessions. Would this kind of thing work in F1? Quite possibly, though I think qualifying is the least of F1's worries right now. There are a number of things that need changing first.